Revolution knows no compromise. Revolution overturns and destroys everything that gets in its way.
You are watching Breakthrough News, and this is the Freedom Side. I am one of your hosts, Eugene Puryear, here as always, alongside my intrepid co-host, Rania, Khalek. Rania, as always, happy to be back alongside you. Oh, I think you're muted.
Every time, at least once. You know what? I'm going to start the show with that. Eugene, it's fantastic to be alongside you for what is another wonderful lineup of guests that we have today.
Great lineup of guests, new background, as people may have seen. So shout out to our crew and our team here at Breakthrough News, Craig in particular. I know a number of people worked many days to get us set up with some new background, new desks, new lights, new sound, all of that. So shout out to the whole BT team. And when you wonder what your donations are doing, it's helping to allow us to make cool, interesting upgrades to all the different things and continue to report from around the world and all the stories that you care about. So happy to be back with you. A lot happening around the world. Obviously, Rania will cover a lot of it here today, as we always do. And as we're getting the show started, I just want to remind everybody who is watching on YouTube, now would be a great time for you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button, then hit the bell so that you get the alerts for the things that you have subscribed to. That way you don't have to do that much work to find out all of the great new content as it's coming out in real time from Breakthrough News, like Dispatches with Rania, Khalek, among other things. So yes, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get the alerts for the things you subscribe to. Also want to shout out everybody who's watching on Free Speech TV. Don't need you to do anything other than keep watching and keep supporting Free Speech TV. And shout out to the whole FSTV team for everything you do so that we can appear to you on that platform as well. Rania, are there other things that you would like our viewers to know as we get started today?
Yes, Eugene. And, I know I always do my little spiel about, you have to help support the show. But I want to give a little anecdote because you just mentioned Free Speech TV.
Please.
I actually first found independent media on Free Speech TV like a decade or more ago. And that's what radicalized me. Independent media radicalized me. And I think it speaks to the importance of independent media. I literally would not be hosting this show with you right now. I wouldn't be at Breakthrough News. I wouldn't be doing journalism if it wasn't for independent media. And I think today it's more crucial than ever. So in addition to liking, subscribing, and sharing Breakthrough News in this episode, and make sure you smash that like button, guys.
Smash that like button.
Love it. I also want to encourage everybody who isn't already, to please consider becoming a member of Breakthrough News by going to patreon.com/Breakthrough News. For as little as $5 a month, though there is no cap, you can become a member of Breakthrough News and access exclusive content, as well as exclusive merch, like this very cool mug that both me and Eugene have, that I use all the time because it looks really cool, and it's got the logo. But more importantly, you can help support independent media like this, not just for the upgrades so we can look better, but so that we can reach more people, so we can keep growing, so we can produce really cool journalism from the ground, video reports from around the world. We've got more coming your way in the coming weeks and months. In order to be able to do that, we need your support so we can help radicalize more Ranias and more Eugenes and more people like you who are watching Breakthrough News. So please do consider becoming a member. You can also, if you're more interested in a one-time donation, go to our website, breakthroughnews.org, or you can do it in the chat. And if you want to give us a huge lump of money because you're just sitting on so much of it and you don't know what to do with yourself, we'll gladly take it off your hands. Send us an email. I think you can do that through our website. Reach out to us if you want to be a big donor. And look so I can get more lights so that my electricity doesn't keep going out. No, it's going to come back. It's fine. Third world stuff. But anyways, that's my spiel, Eugene. I really hope people who haven't already consider becoming members if they can.
Absolutely. Sort of a Blair Witch Project moment for a second there in terms of your look.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate that. And big shout out to everybody
I live
who
in Lebanon.
made any sort of donation or anything anyone's done to help promote the show, help promote the network. We really appreciate it. We're people powered. So you donating and you sharing and liking and telling other people about us is what keeps us going. So thank you. Salute to all of you. Really appreciate it. So let's jump right in here. I'm kind of amazed that these things have happened in the same week, Rania, but Trump was inaugurated on Monday. I mean, it's the lead up to it was so long, it almost feels like it's already been like several months of it. But nonetheless, here we are, first week in Trump's America. So let's jump right in to talk about many different things in relationship to this. There's been a lot of executive orders. There's been various different things happening, the aesthetics of it all. We are very, very honored to be joined as we continue the show by Brian Becker, who is the host of the Socialist program, which you can watch here on Breakthrough News on our YouTube page Wednesday evenings. Brian, thank you so much for being with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Well, great to have you. There's a lot that could be said here. I mean, there's sort of an Armageddon of executive orders coming from Trump. He's signing so many things. He's doing so many things. We're only a week in, so I guess we can only say but so much about the direction of his administration. But, I mean, I just wonder from your perspective, Brian, what these executive orders show. I mean, Trump is someone who obviously came in saying that he's, going to turn America around. He's going to do it for the workers, that he's, out here for average everyday people. Is that what you take away from the first few days of paper signing?
I think we have to think of the first couple of days as mainly bluff and bluster, in fact. Of course, there are important things, Rania and Eugene, that are going to make a difference for the American people. One is the renaming of Mount McKinley. I think working class people all over the United States were very upset that Mount McKinley had been renamed in 2015, and it's now Mount McKinley again. And I know everybody was extremely worried about the fact that the Gulf of Mexico is called the Gulf of Mexico. So Donald Trump is going to rename it, he says, the Gulf of America. These are very, very meaningful things. Anyway, the first executive order, in all seriousness, was sort of 80 executive orders rolled into one, because it was rescinding the speeches, proclamations, and executive orders issued under the Biden administration. So that was order number one. 42% of the actions taken by the Biden administration were rescinded on day one. Some of them, we can talk more about them, but some of them that weren't rescinded are also interesting. All of the protections for reproductive rights were not rescinded. The protections for Native American communities are not rescinded. The measures taken for to remedy or mitigate gun violence, not rescinded. The fact that he protected all of the reproductive rights measures also shows that Trump, and this is the bluff and bluster part, is actually not ideological. He's not buying into the program of the ultra-right. He made his big thing, of course, this week in trying to reverse the ban on TikTok, which was championed by Democrats and Republicans, but the conservative right-wing Republicans were all about banning TikTok. And of course, Trump himself was the one who got that ball rolling back in Trump 1. One of the first executive orders was delivering emergency price relief. I have to read it. Delivering emergency price relief for American families and defeating the cost of living crisis. That's an executive order. Now, this was designed for all executive departments in the federal government to, quote, take appropriate actions to lower the cost of housing and expand the housing supply, eliminate unnecessary administrative expenses. Anyway, none of that is going to impact the price of eggs, for instance, or the price of food. All of that is bluff and bluster. On day number 2, he pardoned all 1,600 of the January 6th convictions. These include people who were beating police officers with the American flag, the people who were committing obvious violent acts, not just the people who happened to go into the Capitol. Again, that was designed to show that Trump's the man, he's the guy in charge. We had other measures right away, taking the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement. That was done right away. When you look at the whole thing, the big issue, of course, was deportations. Are there deportations going on? Yes, there are. Is it this massive, widespread mass arrest going on of immigrant families? We don't quite see that yet. In other words, there's an element of bluff and bluster. They have to build more beds. Parts of the plan leaked out that what ICE was going to do in Chicago, and people in Chicago started mobilizing rapid response solidarity with immigrant families. And then Tom Homan said, well, because word leaked out, we now fear for the safety of our ICE agents. What that really means, that's a euphemism for people are getting together in the United States to resist some of these extreme Trump measures, and they're already making a difference. So I think that we have to understand that Trump is fundamentally about Trump. He's a megalomaniac. He's basically trying to go all around the world and all around the country to say he's the guy, he's the man. Most of these executive orders that are illegal and unconstitutional, not all of them, but many of them are already subject to legal actions. Most importantly, I think the birthright executive order stripping people born in the United States of automatic citizenship. This was guaranteed by the 14th Amendment, one of the 3 Reconstruction Amendments at the end of the Civil War that ended slavery, which made sure that all people born in the United States, including enslaved people at that time, would become citizens and would become citizens going forward. That measure by Trump, which is clearly illegal, unconstitutional, has, we just learned, been blocked in a federal court. So Trump has a far-reaching agenda, but there's a lot of room for people to push back, fight back, not just in the legal arena, but in the streets, in the communities all across the country. And on January 20th, 83 cities, I think it's maybe 85 cities, people were in the streets saying no to the billionaire agenda of Trump and the billionaire team that makes up the Trump government.
So, Brian, I want to also ask you how, when we move forward, we should be viewing the Democrats here. Because so far what I've been seeing is that as much as they called Trump a fascist and said, this is going to be the end of America if he wins again. Okay, he won again. He's in office, and I don't see much opposition to what he's doing. I mean, I know with executive orders, you can't really put up too much opposition because it's an executive order. However, with the appointments of his cabinet picks, Marco Rubio, I think, was approved like 99-0 in the Senate. And Marco Rubio is a horrific figure who wants to strangle any country that, tries to act independent of the U.S., particularly those in Latin America. And on top of that, it's just with the immigration stuff, they haven't been putting up a fight against that. Like, I just don't even see an avenue. I guess my question for you is, or maybe not question, but if you could comment on the fact that we cannot look to the Democrats as an opposition party here because they're not going to behave like one. And moving forward, like as we have this really horrific terror that's going to be inflicted on immigrants under Trump more so than before, and God knows what he's going to do around the world. What is the path forward for those who've been, for example, fighting for the liberation of Palestine in the streets on college campuses and across the country now that we have someone like Trump in office? The repression's going to get heavier, in addition to all the other issues we have to deal with in the U.S.
Well, I think the Democrats have completely capitulated. They've completely folded to Trump. They started that even before Trump took office. Biden and Blinken were saying, look, we're passing the torch to Trump in foreign policy. We made the world stronger. And how did they do that? They said there were strategic gains made by the United States in the Middle East. Well, that was 15 months of genocide. That was the destruction and killing of people in Lebanon. That was the overthrow of the government in Syria, the bombing of Yemenis towns, cities, and ports. They were saying, look, we helped Trump become stronger. They were actually so explicitly saying we're on the same team. And that is because they are on the same team. This is an imperialist system. It's rooted in capitalism. The banks, the bankers in particular, high tech, and the military-industrial complex, those are the premier capitalists. Both parties serve them. So, no, we can't look to the Democrats. The Democrats facilitated look, they've lost to Trump 2 out of the last 3 elections. Joe Biden's legacy is Donald Trump's return to the White House. That's the real legacy of Joe Biden. So we can't look to the Democrats. They are capitulating. The fact that Marco Rubio was, confirmed by a unanimous vote in the U.S. Senate. I mean, Bernie Sanders is in the U.S. Senate. Bernie Sanders has a platform. They could say, look, one of the executive orders that I didn't mention, but I should have, is that Donald Trump also put Cuba back on the state sponsor of terrorism list, designed to make it impossible for Cuba to do business, to buy food, to buy medicine, to buy anything, to buy energy. Biden kept Cuba on the foreign terrorism list until the last week. Trump came in right away and reversed it. Rubio is this fanatical anti-Cuba, anti-Venezuela war hawk who is dedicated to regime change. And the Democrats voted unanimously to accept him. And then you have the tepid, weird, messed up capitalist media like the New York Times saying, well, it's hard for senators to vote against one of their own because Rubio was a senator, as if their proximity in the millionaires club called the U.S. Senate is more important than the lives of Cuban and Venezuelan people. I mean, the Democrats are responsible for Trump's return. They are not going to fight back. And if anything, they are equally warlike around the world. In fact, Biden was doing everything in the last days of his administration to make it obviously clear that the U.S. was dedicated to the prolongation of the Ukraine war, not its end.
Brian, you mentioned the billionaire agenda, and of course, that was very much on display on Monday. You had Mark Zuckerberg, you had Jeff Bezos, you had Elon Musk, the CEO of Google. You've had Jamie Dimon. Davos is happening right now. Jamie Dimon was at the World Economic Forum yesterday and was, defending tariffs, which, for him is sort of a new position, but not really defending tariffs, really defending Trump, like the way he was sort of, posing it. So, almost all, I said to someone recently, even though Trump didn't even win 50% of the popular vote, it almost feels like he won in a landslide the way people are, the whole culture seems to be shifting. But all of the richest people, not just in the United States, but on earth, seem to be making a big show of either being there, being present, or showing some sort of support for Trump in the context of this week. And I just wonder what you make of that. And I think it seems like it has a connection to your point about Trump not being particularly ideological in that sense, just sort of oligarchic.
Exactly. I think that's really who Trump is. In addition to being a megalomaniac, he knows that his real agenda is to take from the poor, from the working class, from the middle class, and give it to the ultra rich. He's a con man, and all of the billionaires around the world are thinking like, oh my God, the guy tried to overthrow the U.S. government or certainly decertify a U.S. election using mob violence, and he's back. That means he must have a lot of sway. And what matters to them is how to plunder, loot, pillage national treasuries for their own further enrichment. And Trump seems to be the guy who has the power. And the fact that all of the so-called former opponents of Trump are genuflecting at the altar of Trump's billionaire cabinet means, in fact, that he seems to be even more powerful than he is. And that's why they are racing to say, we bow, we love you, let me kiss the ring, the Donald Trump ring, because they think they will be rewarded. This is a time where we have to step back and realize that the opposition to Trump, the loyal opposition, the bourgeois opposition, was never really an opposition. And that the real opposition was like the 35 million people who were in the streets in 2020, right before the 2020 election, who were protesting against the epidemic of police violence, who when Trump threatened them with sending U.S. military into the streets, they rose up in an even greater way with greater anger, greater militancy, and broader numbers. We are the opposition. We, the people, are the opposition. And I hope people don't repeat what happened in 2017, where the very sort of, the opposition that seemed to have so much promise at the beginning left the streets and became spectators, hoping that Robert Mueller and the former FBI agents would bring down Donald Trump. They're not going to. Donald Trump is not an agent of the Kremlin. He's an agent of capital. He's an agent of the Wall Street bankers, and they are our real foe. Again, a lot of people are making reasons to sort of be soft on Trump. There are some people who want the end of the war in Ukraine, for instance, who thought, oh, Trump said he would end the war in a day. Now they're kind of backing Trump, or we're backing Trump, hoping that he would end the war in Ukraine. No, what Trump did in the last week is he told Putin, I'm going to sanction you, I'm going to come at you, I'm going to make life for Russians much harder unless you somehow capitulate in Ukraine, which I think the Russians will absolutely not. Their knees are not knocking. They're not scared of all of that rhetoric. But instead, Trump is also demanding that the European capitalists, the NATO countries, more than double their amount of spending on military hardware. He's demanding that they spend 5% of their gross domestic product. Is that a recipe for peace? No, that's a recipe for NATO expansion, NATO militarism, and a bigger, broader war. And he's obviously going along with the Pentagon's designs for a war against China in the Pacific. We have to recognize that Trump is not a voice of peace at all, that was all a con too, and that he is, in fact, wedded to the military-industrial complex.
Well, there is quite a bit to watch here, quite a bit to look. It's going to be an interesting time, that's for sure, and we will continue to cover it on all aspects here on Breakthrough News, including on the Socials program, of which you, Brian Becker, are the host. I'll mention, great episode came out yesterday, very informative about what's happening between Venezuela and the United States that I hope everyone takes a look at. Brian Becker, host of the Socials program, thanks so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you.
Rania?
Well, Eugene, it's good to get some clarity on how we should be viewing the current situation. I just got to say, like, Trump's been in office. It's Thursday. He was inaugurated on Monday. And it's like, it's just the whiplash. Everything, it's like Elon Musk did this, and then Trump did that, and then this person said this, and executive order, and I can't. This, I mean, I know it's all, there's so many distractions, there's so much horror, there's so many important things, but it's almost like it's intentionally meant to make your head spin so that you can't keep up. It's just a circus.
Yeah.
It's an absolute circus.
Like flooding the zone, to use a hockey term. The most interesting whiplash for me is Snoop Dogg, who, of course, performed at the Crypto Ball, at one of as you can imagine, one of the crypto-sponsored Trump inaugural events. But the thing that's notable about it is during the election, he was supporting Kamala Harris, and I can't even repeat what Snoop Dogg said, but he made a video about individuals working with and supporting Trump. The level of hypocrisy just off the charts, I have to say, but it's come a little bit of a controversy. His lawyer actually took to Instagram yesterday to speak on this. So, this is quite a time. But anyway, we're going to turn to another critically important issue. That is the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo and many of the other issues that are resulting from that there in the DRC. And we are very, very honored to be joined here once again on the show by Kambale Musavuli, who is an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo-Kinshasa. Kambale, as always, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for keep shining the light on the Congo.
Listen, it's all we can do here. It's critically important, and people need to know. This morning, of course, there's and today a lot of concern in the eastern part of the Congo because of the ongoing offensive by M23 backed by Rwanda. Many fears that the main city of eastern Congo, Goma, could fall. In a way, I guess I wonder what you make of the fact that the conflict is ongoing. I mean, we've had a couple false dawns of alleged, peace negotiations happening between DRC and Rwanda, mediated by Angola. Most of that did not take place. And it just seems like this M23 is perpetually on the march and keeping the region in conflict. And I just wonder your view on where things stand now.
I think when we are looking at the situation in the Congo and we hear the different names and acronyms of militia groups, it makes it hard for people to really understand who are these people, right? Even when we call them the M23, it gives them some legitimacy, right? The M23 are fighting the Congolese government, the Congolese government forces, but we must be very clear who they are. This is the Rwandan Defense Force. The UN report that was just published in December of 2024, the second report they published in 2024, clearly documents, once again, that the Rwandan military is supporting these rebels and providing them with logistical support, arms, and so on. And when we think about the Rwandan government, Rwanda is a country with its government providing support to a rebel group, one should ask, why is Rwanda supporting rebel groups in the Congo? Why are they providing them weapons and support? It's very simple. It's to get access to Congo's mineral resources at a very cheap price. The displaced population, bringing population to take control of the land that's been vacated by the millions of Congolese who've been displaced, and commit heinous crimes, which according to the United Nations, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possible genocide if proven in a competent court. So we know who is committing these crimes, we know who is backing them, and we also know Rwanda is a small country, probably very, in terms of their population, they can't even size up with the Congo. About 50 million people, Congo has about 120 million citizens. That we know that they could not do this without the backing of the United States. And there is a country in the world that does the same thing. That's Israel, right? Israel has been killing Palestinians with no accountability. But we have to superimpose it to what is happening right now in Davos, right? The president of the Congo is in Davos with John Kerry, where they are discussing extending the so-called Lobito corridor from the Zambia-Angola border all the way up to the eastern part of Congo. Right? The Congolese president is seeking about $1 billion to do so. And surprisingly, as this discussion is taking place, we see a flare in the attacks from the rebels. And what I've noticed over the years is that when there are major actions taking place in the Congo, rebels always push the Congolese government to go into the negotiating table so that they have to have a say. So what is this Lobito corridor about? This Lobito corridor is about getting access to copper, to cobalt, to lithium that Congo has. Right? So if they have to extend it all the way to the northeast, right to Kolwezi, we have one of the largest reserve of lithium in the world at the Manono mine, right? That we know that is what's existent. But how do you put that in the context of what's happening around the globe? At the same time, Donald Trump has just said that he's going to invest $500 billion for AI infrastructure, artificial intelligence infrastructure in the United States. The US cannot compete in AI without having access to raw materials. And guess where these raw materials are coming from? From the heart of the African continent, and it's being discussed at Davos while rebels are threatening to take over the city of Goma. So that's the geopolitics of how to look at what is happening there, that the Congolese, since the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, have continuously fought to regain control of their land and resources for the benefit of the Congolese people. But at every stage they try to do so through different actors, sometimes Congolese actors, sometimes neighbor countries such as Rwanda and Uganda, sometimes multinationals, and sometimes these conferences at Davos where Congolese citizens are not being part of the decision of the Lobito corridor, are finding out that the minerals are going to be controlled by foreign interests. So that is what is at stake in the Congo as we look at these M23 rebels threatening to take over the city of Goma.
And Kambale, can you explain where the Congolese government is on this? Are Congolese authorities even capable of fighting back? Are they fighting back? What's the situation on the ground in terms of pushing back against M23?
The Congolese people, even beyond the government, can fight back. But we have a few challenges. One is even how Congolese law is written, right? So people always wonder about why can't Congolese just pick up a gun and fight? We don't have the right to have weapons, right? As citizens to protect ourselves. The laws are much differently. We have an army. Our army is composed of former rebels. So the rebels of yesterday, through the peace negotiations, decisions come out as saying that we have to mix the army. So they were signing an accord where the rebels of yesterday are now generals wearing Congolese army uniform. When we're even speaking about the M23 rebels today, their commanders were part of the Congolese army in past peace accords, and they've continued to commit crimes as well. We also have a challenge with the Congolese bourgeoisie, right? The Congolese bourgeoisie have their own self-interest. So on one hand, there is a city being threatened to be taken over by rebels, the M23 rebels. On the other hand, you have the president of the Congo at Davos. You have the Minister of Communication of the Congo in Paris to meet French entrepreneurs, French enterprises and businesses to invest in the Congo. And you have the president of the National Assembly in Vietnam also discussing businesses, right? That you can see that the interest is not even to bring an end to the conflict, but who will bring an end to the conflict? I do believe that Congolese have to play a role. They are playing a role in bringing an end to the conflict. But the Congo's conflict is not just a Congolese affair. When we are fighting soldiers, Rwanda Defense Force soldiers, who are actually have equipment to shoot down drones, right? It's not an easy thing as saying, what is the Congolese army saying? And what am I talking about, right? The Congolese government bought 4 Chinese drones, the C4, CH4 drones. And 3 of them were put out of commission by rebels shooting down the drones. I mean, did these rebels buy it at Walmart or eBay? No. I mean, they got it directly from the Rwandan government, the Rwandan military. And where did the Rwandan military get anti-drone equipment? We know that they got it from Poland, because Poland announced that they sold this anti-drone radar to the Rwandan government, thanks to the EU support of the Rwandan government in 2023 and 24. They gave them over 20 million euros of military equipment to the Rwanda regime. So why is Rwanda being supported, right? I keep saying Rwanda, an African country being supported by Western nations. But they are actually the neo-colonial agents on the continent. They are the proxy mercenaries for Western interests. For example, our people in Mozambique know the devastating role Rwandan soldiers are doing in Mozambique. One, protecting French interests, Total, the oil company, and also other missions across the continent, like in Mali, in Central African Republic. So when Western nation, Europe or the United States, need to do certain things on the African continent, they rely on the African partners, such as Rwanda, such as Uganda, such as Kenya. So Congolese are not fighting just the Rwandan army, right? They're also fighting their backers. And that's also, if you have to think about what's happening in Palestine, as Palestinians are fighting for self-determination and liberation, they're not just fighting the Israeli military. They're actually fighting also the US military, which is providing this equipment. Because of that, it makes it very hard to stop the conflict. We do believe that in terms of reining in Rwanda, we will require a lot of Africans to take part of the discussion. SADC countries have played a role in putting pressure, but this issue has to be seen as an African affair and have more people engaged in holding Rwanda accountable while Congolese are dealing with the internal issues to solve the challenges with the compradors that they have in the country.
Well, you mentioned the compradors and the other elements of the bourgeoisie leading the country, and I want to ask you about another issue that has made a lot of news, and that is the at least possibility of mass executions. I believe it's 170 people facing execution. I know it's been an issue that popular movements in the Congo have raised quite a bit around state of emergencies and things like that, and the way repression has been used. Human rights groups are speaking out, but maybe give people some context to why a mass execution wave is being carried out, and then I'd be curious your thoughts about sort of how it fits into this broader picture you're painting.
Definitely. In the context of war, and we've seen that also in Ukraine, oppressive government also use draconian laws to rein in their citizens. So on one hand, Congo is fighting a war to stop rebels backed by our neighbors. On the other hand, the Congolese government used this moment to pull out a moratorium on death penalty. Congo, by law, has death penalty, but for the past 20 years, there's been a moratorium where death penalty will not be used. But in the context of war, the Congolese government has reinstituted the law, saying that they will use it for people who are committing violent crimes or traitors who are collaborating with the rebels. So to say they may be soldiers and others threatening, being traitors in the government. But that's not how this law is being used now, and it's very worrisome. What is being presented in the press is that the Congolese justice system, through its justice minister, have launched a campaign to arrest young people who are part of gangs. And I think El Salvador had to deal with that too. And they've arrested hundreds of them, young gang members, tried them, and found them guilty of heinous crimes. And many of them have committed crimes. And they are all awaiting capital punishment, meaning they are on death row right now. But at the same time that this is happening, there are people, we wonder why they are on death row. We have a case of a young person who is not a street kid in the province of Equateur, who is on death row right now as a gang member. So we're wondering how he ended up. Not only that, last year in the Congo, there was an attempted coup where hundreds of people were arrested. There was an IDF soldier arrested with 2 other Americans arrested, and then others were killed. So with those arrested, they are also awaiting death penalty. They have been sentenced. But in that group, there is one person who was arrested after this coup from what we saw in the court case for having a picture with the coup leader. So they found a picture of him with the coup leader, and they created an association of him with the coup leader. I'm speaking about Jean-Jacques Wanda, who is a Congolese analyst. He has Belgian citizenship. He lived in Belgium. He was brought into the Congo by security services as a consultant, and then found himself arrested as plotting a coup against the Congolese government. All the evidence provided does not make any sense. And he's been found guilty, and he's awaiting to be actually killed. So we are all asking ourselves, how come it's very easy for the Congolese government to arrest young thugs, gang members, to arrest Congolese intellectuals and put them on death row? Yet those who are committing the worst crimes, such as the Minister of Finance, Nicole Kazadi, who sold to the Congolese government a well for over $100,000. There is an embezzlement case of over $70 million taken from state coffers, where they were charging for light bulb for streets $5,000, for wells $100,000, for these economic crimes, where we know who these people are, where they are, where the crimes are being committed, who they are. None of them are being arrested, tried, and killed. So we're seeing this moratorium being removed as a way to target oppositions. Even when we're speaking about these young thugs that we call kulunas in the Congo, they have been used even by the current regime during protests. In past protests, when young Congolese will protest for having elections, the regime will actually pay these gang members money to go assault protesters. So yesterday, these gang members were allied to the government. Today, they're on death row, and those who are committing economic crimes, they're not being held accountable. So that's a very worrisome trend. As I say, it's not just in Congo. We've seen that in Ukraine. We've seen that in El Salvador, in countries that is used to distract for the inadequacy of the current regime to address the economic problems of the country, the security issues, and the large will of the Congolese people to see a new Congo. So it's a distraction, but we should lift up the names of those who are being arrested unjustly and keep an eye on the situation in the Congo so that people are very clear that as of today, we are still fighting for a new Congo, no matter the challenges, be it from our neighbors, be it from our internal challenges, or be it from the international actors who want to take control of our wealth.
Well, we will do everything we can here to keep eyes on the Congo. As always, Kambale Musavuli, an analyst with the Center for Research on the Congo, Kinshasa. Thank you for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you always.
Rania? Are you muted? Did you say something?
Yeah, I was muted. It's because I was messing with it was my heater / AC makes a beep. I do this every time the weather gets either cold or hot. Sorry, guys.
All right, well, let's move to our next story.
I wonder how many times. I remember how many times I'll do this on the show today.
Well, look, we'll move on to our next
game.
story as you work on your climate control issues. Obviously, a major story towards the end of last year was Hurricane Helene here in the United States that devastated large swaths of the country, particularly western North Carolina. As you might imagine, the aftermath of that is still very difficult for those who survived. And we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show by Mary Jo Tucker, who is a resident of Asheville, North Carolina, and with the Helene Survivors Committee. Mary Jo, thanks for being with us. Oh, I think you also might be muted.
I wonder if that's on our end or
It might be on our end.
It might be on. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to work on that.
Started a terrible trend. I'm so sorry.
We will absolutely bring her back in just a second. Obviously a critical issue. I don't want to say too much about it because I'm sure we're going to get her back in just a second here. But yeah, it's tough. We just finished talking about the Congo, so I just say tough situation on so many different angles, so many different terrible situations that the Congolese people are dealing with. But, inspirational to see people continue to struggle, continue to fight, continue to protest, push forward there on a range of different fronts. But it is one we have to keep looking at. Actually, Congo has sued Apple over the issue of conflict minerals. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out in that court case that may show, because all these companies say that they don't know anything about it, that they don't have any conflict minerals. There's all these fake organizations that certify that you have clean minerals or whatever, but most people who know the issue know that that's totally fake. So it'll be interesting to see that it's in French courts whether or not any of this will actually come out, whether or not Apple will be held in the dock. And it's obviously not just Apple, but it could reveal some elements of how these minerals are getting out of the Congo and into our phones, and how close it is to the conflict, because you can see, never mind. Before I get into this, the huge amount of money being made, let's move on. I think we have Mary Jo back with us from the Helene Survivors Committee.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you. Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us. First question I want to ask, is I think, as happens all the time in these situations, all the cameras are there the first couple of weeks, and then, people forget. So, I'm curious, what is the situation there now for those who survived Helene? What are the circumstances people are living in? Is the recovery in progress? What's going on?
It's still progress. It's been a progress since day one, honestly. What we're seeing out in the hotels are people still getting kicked out. We did that protest, and we got that initial extension through the 14th, and then they did another extension through, I believe, the 30th or 25th, which is coming up actually in the next couple of days. But people are still being kicked out between then, and they're still being thrown out in the streets homeless with nowhere to go. As far as rebuilding, I really can't honestly speak on anything, because I've not seen a whole lot of rebuilding. I've seen a lot of people coming in from out of town, like the Amish. They came in and built 100 tiny homes. But as far as rebuilding anything, I've not seen anything started yet. And then, they said that they had the extensions going on through May 30th, I believe, or February. I've heard two different times, either May 30th or February 7th. And most of the people that we've talked to have not been extended at all. Their day is coming up in the next few days. So I honestly don't know what FEMA is doing or what anyone's doing as far as these extensions. But I do know it's cold outside, and there's a lot of elderly and disabled people that are fixing to be homeless because of lack of resources, I guess. I don't really know what to blame that on.
It's really unbelievable to just see this horrific hurricane taking place. Everybody was paying attention. I mean, we have these hurricanes so much more frequently now, and just the federal government is repeatedly responding in an incredibly inadequate manner, almost intentionally so. And like you said, you have these Helene survivors basically being evicted, thousands of them being evicted by FEMA with nowhere to go. So I'm curious, how is the Helene Survivors Committee mobilizing to fight these evictions and demand full relief? Are there avenues to try to protect people from getting thrown into the streets, like you said, in the cold?
Yeah. So, I mean, every day we're out here organizing. We're going to hotels. We're speaking to the majority that we can get to. I think we've been to a total of 36 hotels out of 47 total in Western North Carolina. And just getting some outreach as much as possible, getting resources to these people. Like a lot of them are elderly and disabled. A lot of them can't do for themselves. And so getting resources out, getting some food resources, whether it's that or financial, and those who have been already thrown out, getting assistance with keeping them in the hotels for as long as possible until we can hear back something from FEMA, until we can figure out another situation for them to go into. And it's dwindling down. You know, the community can't keep the community up for so long, but it's just tragic. It really is. There should be definitely more assistance needed. Today we actually went to FEMA. We went to them at the mall and was thrown out. Thrown out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No. Can you describe what do you mean thrown out? Like, what was the interaction? Sorry, describe that.
Yeah, like this just happened. So we walked into the mall. We went and said, "Hey, we're here from the Helene Survivors Committee. We're just trying to get some answers because we're hearing a couple different things come from y'all." And as soon as she heard Helene Survivors Committee, it was like, hang on. She called her boss or whoever supervisor she had talked to, and she was like, "All right, well, they're gonna reach out to y'all specifically. Y'all can go ahead and leave." And we're like, "You can't answer no questions." No, they'll reach out to you and they will give you the information that you're seeking. And it was that was it. Like closed door, no nothing, like just shut down.
Wow.
And like we're talking for the community. Like this is the people that you're throwing out in the streets, and we're here for that. And you can't give any assistance whatsoever. Like I'm not coming for me. I'm not coming for an individual assistance. Like this is masses of people that you're throwing out in the streets, and you're going to deny speaking to me or any of us from the group.
I mean, it's honestly shocking because, of course, these are the same people who say that they're, there for everyone and they want the rest of the country to think that they're backing you. And, obviously we've seen not only what happened with Helene, also, of course, what's happened recently with the wildfires in LA, also Hurricane Milton as well in Florida and different places. I mean, do you see any connection between these different pieces and the lack of response and perhaps not even just the lack of response, but the fact that, these disasters happen? I mean, I can remember Hurricane Katrina, so well. And it just seems like everyone knows these things are going to happen, and there still seems to never be anything proper put in place.
Yeah, no, you're right. And that's what one of the first things I said when Hurricane Helene hit was when Hurricane Katrina came, because I also lived through it. It was almost like not immediately, but they had FEMA trailers set up. And I mean, my sister still lived in one 5 years ago, and I feel like that was an adequate response. Maybe it didn't work out for everybody, but where were any of those here? You had people donating campers. You had people giving their own things to victims here. But FEMA promises all these promises, and the only thing I can see that's the same is they're not. They're not. They have $220 million was supposed to have given to the city of Asheville and here in North Carolina. There's a good significant amount given to LA wildfires. I have not seen any money being put into the recovery reliefs for Asheville. And even when I was in LA this past week, I didn't see any money being put towards the recovery reliefs there. So FEMA just does not do their job, honestly, I don't feel like at all. In any situation. It's just to make the homeless more homeless.
Can you I think that with these kinds of events, everybody pays attention when the fire's going and when the hurricane's coming. And then, a few days after the damage, whether it's water damage or, whether like a house has been blown away. But then, of course, the cameras go away and you're left with the aftermath. And this was God, I'm losing track of time. This was like a couple months ago at this point.
Yeah,
Okay, so a few months ago at this point, wow. So can you just kind of paint us a picture of what's happening on the ground where you are in terms of the aftermath of this? You mentioned people living in hotels. What is the situation with their houses? And when you talk about people living in hotels, what does that look like? What does that mean in terms of people being able to work or afford to be able to buy groceries or all the things that come with having to let your life upended for months and months and months later?
Yeah, so a lot of people here at this hotel, some, I think very few do work. Most are elderly or disabled. But as far as resources going and getting any groceries or anything like that, a lot of them lost their vehicles or cars. So they don't really have those resources, and that's one of the things that we've been trying to get out here. Immediately after the hurricane, you had FEMA, you had the Red Cross coming out, and you had these mobile stations that they had set up so that you could receive this, you could get medical aid, you could, whatever you needed, get your laundry washed. And here at the hotel, it's a little more difficult. You got to find a ride. You have to ask somebody that you don't even know to hopefully give you a ride to the grocery store down the street, or you walk. And it's honestly sad, but as far as working, I know for me, I just personally got a job right here at Cracker Barrel just so I could walk to work, just because it's close by. But there are hotels that have kicked people out during all of this. There's one here in Asheville that wanted to get back to their normal everyday routine with their rich folk and their tourists. And so they kicked people out on FEMA vouchers. And it was like, that should be illegal. That should be entirely illegal, because now these people lost their homes or they're, and you mentioned, they're not, everybody did own a home. They were renters. A lot of these people were renters, whether they rented an apartment or they rented a house. And most of the ones that we've spoken to have said that inspectors have come in and they've inspected the house per se, but not just their specific room that they're doing their FEMA application on. And so they're getting overlooks, or they're getting, the house is fine, then the room must be fine too, so I'm going to put it that it's habitable, when in reality it's not. That's the lack of, I guess, I don't even know what the word would be, honestly, but it's sad. It's honestly sad that the inspectors can't do their jobs, and these people are not getting the help now.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the focus is really just get back to normal, not make sure people's, lives are put back together. Let me just ask you this before we let you go. I mean, you've talked about the Helene Survivors Committee, some of what you all are doing. Is there a place people can go to learn more, to support you, whatever it may be?
Yeah, definitely. It's helenesurvivors.org, I believe. I think that's it. Just go sign a petition. The petition, it goes straight to our Region 4 FEMA directors, and demanding that we need housing, we need assistance, and we're not going to stop fighting until we get it. We're going to continue doing our everyday, day-to-day outreach and request assistance and demand assistance until it gets here. I don't know if y'all knew, but when we went to the city council meeting to look and listen to what their plans were with this $220 million, they were talking about a 3-year business development plan, not recovery reliefs. So we're going to still fight every day, whether it's reaching out or it's going to the city council meetings. And if anybody wants to join, come on out and help speak for your community. We all need it.
Right on. Well, we really appreciate it. We'll continue to cover this. Oh, sorry, lost you there. Anyway, just wanted to thank you, Mary Jo Tucker with the Helene Survivors Committee. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank y'all for having me.
Rania?
I mean, that is infuriating.
Yeah.
That is absolutely infuriating. It's not, sadly, it's not surprising, but just completely infuriating. For the U.S. is such a wealthy country. It's the richest country in the world, and it treats its population like trash.
Yeah, no shortage of money, but we sent billions of dollars to Ukraine. Also Israel, but I mean, it's in a way it's shocking, actually. Well, maybe it's not that shocking for some people who know the issue, but it should be shocking because it's really amazing that they're scrimping and pinching pennies and not giving anything out to people who are surviving hurricanes, right here in Western North Carolina. And of course, Trump is, I think, going to go there next week. So there's a lot of grandstanding around what happens in these natural disasters, but you don't really see any real follow through. Yeah, you're right. It's shameful. It's disgusting. Well, I guess we can move on to another shameful and disgusting thing, and that is the ongoing treatment of the Palestinian people by the Israeli regime there. A lot happening in the West Bank, of course, in the wake of the ceasefire in Gaza, which is now trying to rebuild. We are very, very honored to be joined here on the show once again by Layan Sima Fuleihan, who is the education director at the People's Forum and an editor at 1804 Books. Layan, thanks so much for being back with us.
It's great to be back on the show.
Well, it's great to have you here. Obviously, we're just coming in the wake of the ceasefire, and it seems that, we had the ceasefire in Gaza, and now I'll just read you the headline from Al Jazeera. Israel forcibly evicts thousands and torches homes during West Bank assault. So, obviously, they were doing a lot in the West Bank before, but seemingly an acceleration here in the wake of the ceasefire in Gaza. Talk to us about what's happening in the West Bank and what's behind this attempt to just bring even more destruction to the people of Jenin and elsewhere in the area.
Well, we are witnessing a major assault by the Israelis on in particular, the West Bank city of Jenin, which is where a lot of the resistance activities of the people of Palestine is located. They're calling this Operation Iron Wall, and they launched it just a few days after the implementation of the ceasefire in Gaza. They've already killed many, more than a dozen Palestinians. They've wounded over 100. They've displaced many. They have conducted the kinds of raids and mass arrests. Really, truly, the correct word for this is not arrest, it's mass kidnapping, where they round up Palestinians in the street, engage in torture-like activity, and then detain them illegally. This is what's happening in Jenin. It's very reminiscent of what we witnessed in Gaza over the past 15 months. On top of it, they have also now begun the siege of healthcare facilities, destroying the roads leading to hospitals, filling the pathway with dirt, making it impossible for vehicles to go in and out, and laying siege to those hospitals where people who have been displaced from Jenin have been seeking refuge. They have raided other cities across the West Bank. They recently just did a raid on a camp near Nablus using a Palestinian ambulance. They hid inside a appropriated Palestinian ambulance to conduct a raid. They are using illegal crimes of war mechanisms to conduct these raids. And at the same time, Zionist settlers across the West Bank are going on a rampage, burning structures, burning vehicles, carrying out vigilante violence against Palestinians. And it seems like a coordinated, and it is a coordinated, escalated assault on the people of the West Bank now that the Israelis have to implement this ceasefire in Gaza. In some ways, to appease those who were staunchly against the ceasefire inside the Israeli political echelons, who wanted to continue destroying Gaza, continue fighting until with no end in sight. And Smotrich, the finance minister, who was one of the most vocal politicians against the ceasefire deal, is very happy with this escalation in the West Bank. And so in some ways, it's appeasing the far-right sections of Israeli political establishment that wanted to continue the war in Gaza. And we really can see that it is actually connected. What's happening in the West Bank now is exactly the same tactics as what happened in Gaza. Smotrich himself said, we want to turn the West Bank into Jabalia. It needs to look like Jabalia. And if you remember what the images that had been circulating of the destruction of Jabalia, it's total destruction. So it's really a horrific thing to be watching right now. It's very significant that it's happening without any U.S. pressure against it. During the ceasefire in Gaza, the United States has not admonished Israel, has not put any pressure on Israel to stop this new escalation of the genocide against the Palestinian people, just now in a new location. And I'll just close by saying this is not the first time that Israel has been assaulting Jenin and the West Bank. In fact, over the past year, since October 7, Israel has assassinated over 870 Palestinians in the West Bank, in some ways under the radar, doing exactly what they were doing in Gaza, but against the Palestinians in the West Bank. And they're looking at it as an attempt to destroy the Palestinian resistance everywhere it may be, whether it's inside the Palestinian territories or outside them. So I think we should look at it as all a connected phenomenon.
It's really important you mention it that way. And just to reaffirm what you're saying about Israel using Gaza methods, I mean, the Israeli defense minister Israel Katz for months and months, maybe even the last year, has been repeatedly advocating for applying the so-called Gaza method to the West Bank, specifically with regard to Jenin. And now I just want to quote him because he said just yesterday that the Jenin operation, which they've titled Iron Wall, which everything they title just always has like an eerie, disgusting sound to it. He said that this was the first lesson from the method of repeated raids in Gaza. So they're openly saying they want to apply Gaza methods to the West Bank. There's also been airstrikes as well as the flattening of homes. I mean, it's really frightening. And Layan, I think what's most astonishing about this, you mentioned that there's been no condemnation by the U.S. In fact, it's been quite supportive of this, is the fact that there's been 15 months of genocide in Gaza, meaning for 15 months, the constant massacres of Palestinians, the destruction of their neighborhoods, I mean, apocalyptic level destruction, like what we see in the aftermath of the Gaza genocide, has become so normalized that people aren't really saying much about what's happening in the West Bank. It's sort of going by, like you mentioned, almost 900 people killed in the West Bank last year. I mean, any other year, that would be a headline story of epic proportions. Instead, because in Gaza, you had God knows how many people killed, definitely more than the 45,000 number that's being cited. But the point is, so many people have been murdered in Gaza that 900 seems like nothing. And so it's really scary how normalized this violence has become, to the point where almost anything else overshadows what you just described in the West Bank. And I'm asking you, as somebody who is an organizer, you know, what is your, I guess, response to the fact that we have to contend with the fact that the last 15 months becoming background noise, the violence of the last 15 months becoming background noise? People, I guess we can't, like, how do you deal with the fact that we can't let people allow this to go on like background noise?
Well, one of the things that we have to do is actually deliver the news about what's happening in Jenin and the rest of the West Bank. I think it's extremely important to note that journalists have little to no access to Jenin right now. In fact, the Palestinian Authority is also coordinating and making that possible. The Palestinian Authority, which is not truly a representative of the Palestinian people in this, the Palestinian Authority that came out of, established in the Oslo Accords. One of the main points in its establishment was security coordination with Israel, and we can see that on display more than we've seen in the past years. Actually, the Palestinian Authority itself carried out a 40-day assault on Jenin. Of course, not with the same level of brutality, but still brutal assault on Jenin right before Israel then launched its operation. It has carried out the arrests of journalists, resistance fighters, and also supported in many ways the Israeli operation more openly than we've seen in the past in the name of national security. Of course, the different Palestinian political groups and military groups have condemned the manipulation of the Palestinian Authority, the use of the Palestinian Authority against the Palestinian people. And there's great sentiment of rejection of the actual governance of the Palestinian Authority because of its current and its past role in security coordination with the Israelis. But part of this means that it's hard to actually get news. I mean, it's like just like in the early days of the genocide and other instances of brutal Israeli bombings and assaults on the Palestinian people, it's not always a guarantee that we get news. Now we're in a new era. And I actually don't think, I'm not as worried that the violence of the past 15 months will become background noise, because the movement in solidarity for Palestine has completely transformed the way people, one, get their news about Palestine, and two, how they interpret it. I think the task here is to make sure that we are effectively communicating what's happening. And it's particularly a problem right now to get updates from what's happening in Jenin. The coverage it's very difficult to get reports from on the ground. There's no electricity. There's no transport in and out. It's a full siege on Jenin. So this is a challenge that we have to face, but not an insurmountable one, because we now have mass public consciousness that is much more in favor of the Palestinian people. We also have to continue reminding ourselves and the general audiences that we have, the people that we're talking to, our communities, our organizations, the ceasefire is an achievement for the Palestinian people. There's more trucks coming in, more aid trucks coming into Gaza right now than before October 6, 2023. This is like the impact of the terms of the ceasefire on the people of Gaza is actually incredible. It's historic. Now the destruction that now needs to be rebuilt is also beyond comprehension. The destruction is horrific. It's apocalyptic, like you said, Rania. But we also know that Israel does not always respect ceasefires. And even since the ceasefire came into implementation in Gaza, they still had Israeli snipers assassinating Palestinians just for walking around their own territory. These kinds of violations that kind of go under the radar because they're not huge and they're not the kind of shock and awe violence that we saw over the past 15 months. In Lebanon, where there was a ceasefire, where now we're coming up on the date that Israel should be withdrawing, now they're saying they want to stay longer, and they've put in an official request to stay longer. And the United States, as a non-objective mediator, playing the official role of mediator of all of these, of the ceasefire in Lebanon and the ceasefire in Gaza, but fully behind the Israeli interests, is not going to be an effective force in putting pressure. Trump is a wild card. He wants a ceasefire because he wants to do other things, but members of his cabinet have promised the annexation of the West Bank in return for the ceasefire. So all these things are things that we need to be alert to and that we need to be constantly communicating about. And I think it's really important that it's on shows like Breakthrough News and that we are talking about it with our organizations. I know that the movement for Palestine is not going to quiet down anytime soon. Reconstruction is also political work. Watching the implementation of the ceasefire is just as urgent as being a witness to the genocide, because the genocide is an ongoing thing. As long as the occupation exists, it is a genocidal occupation. So now we have masses of people who are going to be interested and urgently watching the developments from now.
Mm-hmm. Well, one other issue that seems to deserve watching as well in relationship to this, Layan, and what you're just mentioning, the movement for Palestine, is even though it's flying under the radar, the repression against students, especially who have been protesting, it seems that is continuing apace in many major universities and institutions, and the Trump administration continuing to threaten those who stood up against the genocide in Gaza. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that's also an important element of the aftermath of the ceasefire.
Well, the repression against students is something that's really important to watch, because it's happening in many ways delayed because of the calendar of the academic year. A lot of students are facing disciplinary actions now, months and months after the encampment actually took place. So it was last spring semester, and now they're facing the disciplinary procedures. And so the attention on the student movement has lessened. So it allows people to kind of maybe not hear about the news of what's going on the student campuses. But what we're seeing on the student campuses is not only disciplinary procedures against students in a delayed way, but also new definitions for anti-Semitism on campus that would restrict the freedom of speech of students to an incredible degree, saying things that like in Harvard, for example, including things like criticism of Israel in the definition of anti-Semitism, or of Zionism in the definition of anti-Semitism. I mean, this kind of policy for schools is really dangerous, because and needs to be exposed and needs to be fought against, because this is a complete manipulation, one, of the term anti-Semitism, and two, completely weaponized against a particular political opinion held by the majority of students, I would say, across the country, who have been part of and have been dedicated to raising awareness around the Palestinian cause and demanding an end to the complicity of their institutions that they are part of with the Israeli occupation. And so it's important to really expose what's going on and to support the students, because the fact is that whether the attention of the world is on the campuses or not, the attention of the Zionist institutions is always on the campuses. Before this upsurge in mass movement for Palestine over the past 15 months, Zionist institutions had been putting millions of dollars every year into combating pro-Palestinian speech on campus. And it completely went under the radar because no one knew about it, but the ones who really did care about it were the Zionists. So whatever, they're really afraid of pro-Palestinian or the Palestinian narrative itself being something that students can have access to. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. I think it's always the mistake of the Zionist project and of U.S. imperialism as well, to think that by just trying to stamp out an idea, you can kill it, whether it's by killing human beings in Gaza and in the West Bank, or whether it's by trying to silence language and a narrative with money, with intimidation. That doesn't kill ideas. That doesn't kill the spirit of resistance. It doesn't kill solidarity. So it's not going to succeed. But we all have a role to play in making sure that it does not.
Layan Sima Fuleihan, Education Director at the People's Forum and an editor at 1804 Books. As always, thank you so much for some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. Rania?
Well, Eugene, I can't believe the images I'm seeing out of Gaza. Like, I know we all assumed it was just decimated, but to see the actual images of destruction, I can't even imagine being there in person. It's just utterly stunning that anybody would still sit there and justify or excuse or try to say that there's just a terrorist hiding in every single home on every street. There was one UN official who was giving a video interview and said, we've been driving around for 10 minutes, and for 10 minutes of driving around, I haven't seen a single structure standing. There's people who return to their neighborhoods only to find that they don't know where their neighborhood is because they don't recognize anything, because there's nothing left. So to see that have happened, and then to be implementing the same strategy in the West Bank, and to still have everybody throwing their hands up, I mean, it's just, what won't the institutions of the world allow to happen to Palestinians?
Yeah.
There still hasn't been a limit.
Coming out today, 70% of roads destroyed in Gaza, which is like, I mean, so there was just someone standing every 10 feet with an RPG. I mean, it's obvious that they went out of their way to make it, uninhabitable, hoping that people will leave. I mean, that's the point. Kill as many people, make it as uninhabitable as possible, and make rebuilding seem so daunting that people will leave. They said it the whole time. We want to thin out the population, blah, blah, blah. But we'll keep coming back to that and keep following that. We want to get to our next guest here, talk about how immigrant communities in the United States are standing up, organizing, doing various things, responding to the incoming Trump administration. I guess it's already here, which of course is promising mass deportations. And we are very, very honored to be joined here by Jorge Torres, who's the National Organizing Director for the National Day Labor Organizing Network, or NDLON. Jorge, thank you so much for being with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, great to have you here. And I guess I just wanted to start here first with how you all are responding to the demonization of immigrants, because the way it's presented is, of course, that immigrants are somehow a danger to the country and need to be removed, and removed quickly. And I just wonder how you all are responding to that kind of rhetoric.
Nothing has shown that most of the deportations has been because of criminal backgrounds. And in fact, most of the deportation has been in the lower numbers when it comes to the criminal backgrounds. And it has, studies across the history has shown that most of the deportation that have happened in Biden administration and Obama administration, even with Trump administration in 2007, the numbers are low in terms of crime backgrounds the immigrants has had. So it is a racist, is an agenda, is a white supremacist agenda that we all know, and they want to justify by saying that they're going to deport, detain criminals, and we have to be very clear about this. It's just a justification to arrest A and to deport and detain X, Y, and Z, and not just going for A.
I'm curious, Jorge, from your perspective, what is the attitude in the immigrant community right now with regard to the threats from Trump? Is there a sense of fear? Is there perhaps some spirit of defiance?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing Know Your Rights workshops, deportation defense workshops from the past, I don't know, 2 or 3 months in high speed, but we have always been doing this because this is not just something that is just happening. It's aggressively like that, with a lot of executive orders in terms of deporting and detaining. It has happened. This is the first time that I had seen in my experience working with undocumented community for the past 15 years. But we've been doing these workshops across the in the 24/7, I will say, and the past 2 months, and that is definitely a fear. It's definitely fearness. It's definitely the sensation of like, what should I do if something happens to me? What the hell I'm gonna do? Because no matter how many times you tell the community, do not open the door, you have a right to a lawyer, you have this, you have the right to do this, to not sign any documents. No matter how many times you do that, when the ICE officers comes to your door, is always the fearness of like, what's going to happen, and people tends to act in a different way. So it's definitely fear, and I think like what they are doing is being well done, is basically putting the seed of fear in our communities. But it's also, on the other hand, is also a good way that I've been seeing across the country too, in many different states. The is a good way where organizations are working with local other organizations, organizing deportation defense teams, organizing locally. So is a fear, is a fearness, is like, what should we do about it? But it's also like, what is that we have to do in these terms?
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, because the next question I wanted to ask you was to talk more about what you all at NDLON are doing and partnering with other organizations to organize communities around the country.
Since the day one that we know that was going to happen, we start organizing comités populares, or popular committees of defensa del migrante, or defending migrants. It is just like anybody that wants to organize locally in your town and your neighbor. Right now, because the institutions are not going to save us, is even the trust that we had built with local police sometimes, or immigrants have like built that trust is lost. Like, everybody is just scared about calling the police. We're going backwards 10, 15 years. And it's basically anyone that wants to organize a local committee, that wants to organize Know Your Rights workshops, or organize teams in case La Migra or ICE come to your neighbor. That's basically what we're doing, is organize local committees that will defend immigrants in case immigration shows up, so La Migra shows up, so ICE shows up. But more than anything is to create power locally, and to create a movement from the bottom up.
So, Jorge, we saw that the National Day Labor Organizing Network mobilized immediately when the fires in LA started. Can you talk about the organization's efforts to help meet the needs of the community in LA?
Yeah, I've been saying that when the government is in a big challenge, and they don't show up, the community shows up. We had seen this when we were in COVID, and we had seen this when we were in Hurricane Sandy, and it was basically day laborers organized fire relief brigades, where they were playing a crucial role in terms of supporting, cleaning, and actually go outside and to the neighborhood of Pasadena and Altadena in Los Angeles, to clean up and to to offer their labor, which is the best thing that they have, and humanity, and we have now hundreds of volunteers, and I think this is what community looks like when it comes to these disasters. And it doesn't matter if the neighbor that you are going there and helping, they don't like immigrants or they do like immigrants. Day laborers are not looking to see that if you don't like, and then if you like them, or if you against them, or you want to deport them. Day laborers are there to support, to clean, and to show that we can, with all this hate that we live in this country, we can actually show some love.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was amazing to see that right out, the fire brigades there at NDLON and everyone who rallied to you. And I guess what I want to ask you here before we let you go, Jorge, I think there's probably a lot of people out here watching, wondering, what they can do. They may be undocumented themselves. They may just want to support. Where can they find NDLON? Where can they find resources and how to support?
We have a website. Everything is on our website in terms of if you want to build a local popular committee, the website is NDLON.org. There you have all the Know Your Rights materials, all deportation defense materials that we have built. Know Your Rights that we have since the SB 1070 in Arizona, and same thing with the fires. If you want to donate, you want to be part of the volunteers, please go to our website. And also we have our worker center located in 500 and Lake Avenue in Pasadena, California. So you can also go there. We have a list of several items that you can donate, and so it's basically is a perfect way to stay connected.
Mm-hmm. Jorge Torres, National Organizing Director for the National Day Labor Organizing Network. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Rania?
Well, Eugene, we've taken a trip around the world yet again. I feel like we just start adding like a positive story.
Yeah. Well, I at the end,
one of those.
Yeah, the thing is that's the challenge, is how do we find one? I don't have a positive story, but I do have a clip that I wanted to share with you. If you go to whitehouse.gov, the White House landing page, the president has added a new video to give some, I guess, indication of what's coming with this country, with his administration. I just want to show you a video and maybe say a little bit more about the Trump administration before we get out of here.
Is that like a?
This is if you go to the White House website, this is the first thing you see.
It's a teaser for an upcoming series called The White House, is all I understand from that.
It really does feel like that. I know people were joking, last year, they're really enjoying the last season of The United States, the series, but it looks like perhaps there is a season 2. But I go back to what Brian was saying at the beginning, about Trump being bluster and bluff and all of this, like, add this video, like, what is the purpose of this? And as much as they're talking about government efficiency, how much do they have to pay someone to make this dumb video? The eagle flying. I mean, so much of it is just pomp and circumstance. But then we have, Mary Jo on from Asheville in Helene, and she's like, yeah, people are being kicked out of their hotels by FEMA. Elderly people, disabled people are going to be out in the street during a polar vortex maybe this weekend. And it's like the cognitive dissonance that exists between the sort of the presentation factor of Trump and the actual reality of Trump. And I mean, of course, Biden didn't do that much for the Helene survivors either. But you know what I'm saying? Like, you think if you were who you said you were, rather than making videos like this, you would make sure that FEMA wasn't kicking people out of their hotel who have nowhere else to go in any time, but certainly in the middle of an extremely cold winter.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Eugene. It feels very dark and dreary. Not that it didn't feel dark and dreary last week. Like, I don't want to make it seem like, oh, things were so rosy until Trump became president. But I think that Trump, in what he represents, it's like an embodiment of this kind of rot and decay of U.S. empire. And it's like dark, it's scary because of how much it can take down with it, but it's also so doomed, and it's also digging its own grave, and it's also like pure entertainment at the same time. It's like just a twisted episode of Black Mirror that doesn't end.
Yeah, that's a good reference. And I mean, let's not forget, Trump is an entertainer. He is a showman. And I think that that's a big part of what he does is he knows how to present things in a way that make them appear different than they are. But let's not forget, like, they're teeing up a lot of unbelievable things. I mean, they're going to try to push through this so-called reconciliation bill that'll contain, $3 to $4 trillion of tax cuts that will go almost totally for the richest people. I mean, one of it is extending the Trump tax cuts, Rania, the ones he passed in 2017. And just to give you a sense of who that really benefited, the top 0.01% of Americans got about a $252,000 tax break from those 2017 Trump tax cuts. And the person right in the middle of the income scale, so right in the middle, like middle class, I guess if you want to look at it from a spatial perspective, $910. So average middle class person, $910. The richest people on earth, $252,000. And again, they want to extend that and do more tax cuts for the richest people. And when you really look at the modeling around the tax cuts and the tariffs, the Tax Foundation has done this modeling, and this is not like a radical communist group, right? The Tax Foundation, pretty sort of centrist, whatever. And their perspective of the tax cuts, if Trump did everything he said he was going to do during the campaign, plus put in the tariffs, would be a 0.8% increase in GDP over the 4 years. It'd be 536,000 jobs, that would be created, net jobs that would be created. Trump says in the manufacturing renaissance, it would take like 5 million jobs just to have the number of manufacturing jobs you had in the year 2000. Forget 1979 when you had the highest number. And his proposals, 500 and some thousand jobs, 0.8% increase in GDP. So basically, all that's going to happen is rich people are going to get a lot more money. You can do a lot with $252,000. I know if you're like a billionaire, that's like a drop in the bucket. But, I think those of us who don't have $252,000 see what you could do with that and what that means if that's just handed to you as a tax break. Corporations are going to get a lot of money, but ultimately the average everyday person isn't going to see much of anything. A significant number of jobs are not going to be created. The economy is not going to have some sort of major, recovery or renaissance or whatever it's going to be. The rich will get richer and the rest of us will at best stagnate. And I think that's the reality of what we're talking about here. Trump apparently was meeting with them about the no tax on tips, but they're not going to raise the federal minimum wage, right? And when you look at the minimum wage workers, as an interesting report about this from the Economic Policy Institute, talking about how much the Fight for 15 actually has done for workers, like tens of billions of dollars in wages. So it's not as if it hasn't done anything. But the point they make is the cost of living is now so high that even for many low-wage workers who have seen record increases in their income, for basically every low-wage worker, there is no metropolitan area in the country where a full-time job where they work actually is enough to get them out of poverty. And Trump is not addressing that. And, I'm sorry to say, reducing the taxes on tips, it might be a little bit around the edges, but it's not going to be lifting people out of poverty. So ultimately, it's a total bait and switch. That's why they have these videos on the White House website. That's why they're doing a million different, things. That's why they have the Department of Government Efficiency tweeting out, we're doing this, we're doing that to save people money, but ultimately they're going to be trying to cut things. Trump actually rescinded one of the executive orders to help cap the price of insulin and make it easier to have cheaper prescription drugs. Now, of course, Biden did almost nothing on that front, but the small amount that he did do, Trump is reversing it as just a gift, to the pharmaceutical companies, who, by the way, he had a private meeting with him and RFK. I thought RFK was going to take on the big pharma companies, right? Isn't that what people were trying to tell us? Oh, support RFK, support Trump. Well, him and Trump had a little sweetheart meeting with pharma and Pfizer and all these other people at Mar-a-Lago, figuring out how they're going to, keep things exactly the same. So anyway, I'll just stop there. But, Trump 2.0 is the same as Trump 1.0. And I don't think the arc of where the country is going is really looking upward.
Eugene, it's so upsetting on a number of fronts, but especially because Trump has managed to, because he's such an entertainer, and he has managed to frame himself as this character who's like there to throw a wrench into a corrupt system. He's managed to convince a pretty decently sized slice of people that he is actually gonna fix what all these rich people, break. And it's like, he is the rich person. Like, he represents them. They're standing side by side with him, and he helps them and then convinces you that he's helping you because he got rid of some diversity, equity, and inclusion program, or because like men are men and women are women. And it's like, I mean, it's just really sad. It's really sad. And, on top of all that, it's like when you talk about the U.S., the way you just described it in terms of the situation for working class people and poor people. And then we heard from that woman from the Helene Survivors Committee and the situation post-hurricane for people in North Carolina. It's just, you start to feel like the U.S. is applying policies. It's either these sort of like de-development policies it's imposed on the third world, to, keep them in a level of like no self-sufficiency, no sovereignty, and just like constant brain drain and just like basic, survival mode. And it's imposed that on pockets of the U.S. I'm not trying to compare it to the same degree necessarily. I'm not saying the U.S. is like mass bombing or doing to parts of the U.S. what it does to like El Salvador, but in some ways it kind of does. And I feel like that's where we're at in U.S. empire now. It's just like treating its own population, at least certain segments of it, the way it treats the rest of the world. And it's not good.
Yeah, no, terrible. No, you're right. Trump himself, maybe a billionaire, at least 100 millions. I think a dozen billionaires in his cabinet. We saw all the biggest tech billionaires at his inauguration. Jamie Dimon, the most powerful banker on earth and the largest bank, defending him at the World Economic Forum. Like, if you can see all that and think Trump's for working class people, I don't know. We maybe need to have a talk outside of this for a long time because it's just not there. But yeah, we'll have to keep covering it and keep seeing where it's going. I mean, we're only in week one. But nonetheless, as we've said the whole time, I don't think the Democrats are any real answer here. But that doesn't mean that, somehow we should be saying that Trump is better. The two-party system has failed all the people in this country who aren't rich for the past 50, 60, 70, 80 years, maybe longer than that. And yeah, anyway, we'll keep tracking it here at Breakthrough News. Rania, before we get out of here, are there things you would like our viewers to know?
Yes, I want to remind everybody to please like, subscribe, and share. Smash that like button, you guys. Very important.
Like button.
Very important to help boost us in the algorithm. And also, I want to encourage people once again to please, if you're able to become a member of Breakthrough News, go to patreon.com/Breakthrough News, become a member, and you can access exclusive content as well as access exclusive merch. And on top of that, the most important part of that is you can be a part of funding independent media so more people can hear what me and Eugene just talked about. That conversation is never going to happen on CNN. It's not going to happen on MSNBC. And it's not going to happen on a lot of other YouTube shows, by the way. It's happening in independent media like this one. So, and the more people who support us, the bigger we get, the wider reach we have, the more reporting we can do, the more programming we can do, and the more we can inform people that Trump is lying to them. Democrats are also lying to them, and these are not the paths forward to a better future.
Look, I couldn't say it better than that, so I will just leave it there for myself, for Rania, Khalek, for our whole team at Breakthrough News. This was The Freedom Side. We will see you next time.